Do you want to know why millions of men are quietly walking away? And why it's impossible to ignore that feeling since you saw this title? Because something inside recognizes that this path is calling. That withdrawal is not surrender. It's transformation. A silent vibration like a whispered enough that is never said out loud, but begins to resonate so strongly it can no longer be silenced. Millions of men are walking away from the social expectations that shaped them for years. But what isn't revealed is that they aren't fleeing the world. They're fleeing the version of themselves the world forced them to play. That inner rupture is a silent revolution. A revolution that's born in the mind and ends up changing everything. They aren't exhausted victims. They are men who have begun to see through a very ancient lie. And here's where the truly hypnotic part begins. That stepping away, that silence, that step back, isn't emptiness. It's a state of readiness. A space where the man stops running out of obligation and starts walking by choice. Where he stops obeying someone else's script and begins to listen to the first voice he always ignored. His own. An unsettling truth appears. He was always harder on himself than the external expectations that pressed on him. He demanded stability when he was broken inside. He forced himself to be strong when the weight was already crushing him. He pretended to be confident while living surrounded by noise. And he did it because he was convinced that this was what it meant to mature, to grow, to become a man. But now a crack appears. A fine, invisible crack that separates what he was from what he could become. And here comes a twist no one usually sees coming. When a man stops living to satisfy the world, he begins to discover himself for the first time. And that truth does not arrive with glory. It arrives with strangeness, with discomfort, with the feeling of finally taking off a mask so tight it leaves the skin raw. But that pain, that first honest pain, is freedom trying to enter. Because the most powerful part of this silent withdrawal is not in rejecting external expectations, but in ushering the man into a territory that was always forbidden to him, the territory of self-knowledge. A man who knows himself ceases to be manipulable. He ceases to be predictable. He ceases to be a tool. He becomes someone with his own direction. And that, though no one admits it, is what the world fears. All his life he was taught to be accountable, to comply, not to fail. But no one taught him to listen to himself, to understand his emotions, to build his identity without depending on someone else's echo. That's why this silent movement is not an abandonment. It's a rebirth without noise. Men are not walking backwards. They are walking inward. And here, a more intense truth arises. The real reason so many are stepping away is that they discovered the price of continuing to obey was losing themselves. Losing themselves without noise, without screams, without drama. Losing themselves in the most dangerous way, in silence. Then comes an instant that changes everything. That moment when one asks, perhaps for the first time, what part of one's life was a decision, and what part was obedience disguised as responsibility. And that question doesn't leave. It enters, it stays, it grows, it watches. Many did not step away from exhaustion, but from clarity, because they understood that the more they tried to fit in, the farther they drifted from themselves. And a man who does not choose does not live. He survives. What's fascinating is that this movement has no leaders, no speeches, no flags. There are no proclamations. There are no protests. There is no noise. It's a revolution without sound. An awakening that happens behind closed doors when no one is looking. And the surprising thing, the men who step away don't disappear. They return as something completely different. They return more centered, calmer, harder to break. Because when one no longer depends on pleasing, a dangerous truth appears. Wholeness doesn't need permission. And then the next phenomenon begins. The break with the need for external validation. It doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise suspicion. It's silent. As if, suddenly, the mind stopped reacting to the same stimuli that used to define everything. For years it was taught that value depended on others' eyes, that achievements needed applause to be real, that approval was gasoline. But living at the mercy of external judgment turns anyone into a reflection. And many men are stopping their chase of that reflection for a simple reason. It no longer feeds them. Every compliment evaporates. Every criticism lingers. External validation reveals itself for what it always was, a mirage. Then one of the deepest transformations arrives. The man begins to ask himself whether his life has value when no one is watching, whether his decisions matter when there are no claps, whether his path is still his without spectators. That question can destroy entire structures, but it can also build a new life. And here another level of awakening emerges: emotional responsibility. The point at which a man stops blaming the world, stops expecting rescues, stops looking for saviors, and begins to recognize that rebuilding himself is his task, his alone. That is the exact moment he stops being a social product and becomes a real individual. Emotional responsibility is not a burden. It is the first form of freedom. And that change triggers an inevitable consequence. The man's relationships change. Not because he grows cold, but because he stops confusing love with self-abandonment, loyalty with sacrifice, affection with depletion. He begins to set boundaries, to say no, to refuse to tolerate dynamics that drained him in silence. Authenticity, for the first time, guides his bonds. And being authentic always attracts real relationships. Being obedient attracts relationships that survive thanks to one's own exhaustion. And a still deeper level arrives: the redefinition of success. All his life, he was taught that success meant constant sacrifice, accumulation, public recognition, material stability at the cost of emotional stability. But the awakened mind discovers something radical. Success is not external shine. It is inner peace. It is not applause. It is mental silence. It is not power over others. It is power over oneself. When that inner compass changes, life rearranges itself effortlessly. And then a truth arises that runs through everything. Masculine energy stops being defense and becomes conscious presence. Clarity appears. The clarity to distinguish what nourishes and what destroys, which bonds lift and which dim, which struggles deserve his strength and which only consume his spirit. And then the inevitable happens. The man begins to distinguish the life he inherited from the life he wants to build. And he leaves the old skin behind without remorse. The world notices. Not because he makes noise, but because he stops being predictable. The peace he finds is not the absence of problems, but the absence of masks. A quiet strength that doesn't need to explain itself. A calm that doesn't depend on being understood. A fortitude that can no longer be broken because it doesn't rest upon anyone's approval. And the final truth emerges. The men who walk outward are actually walking inward in order to return whole. And when they return, they no longer accept superficial bonds. They no longer tolerate empty conversations. They no longer invest their energy in places where they are disarmed. They become selective, conscious, deep. And that awareness is magnetic. That's why the question is no longer, why are so many men stepping away? The real question is, what are they finding by doing so? And why does that make them stronger than ever? And what comes after this point shows what happens inside any man who decides to be reborn without warning. Then watch what happens right after that silent rebirth, when the man has already broken with expectations, with others' validation, and with the old version of himself. A void appears, but not a dark void, a fertile void. An inner space that used to be occupied by noise, inherited obligations, guilt, and others' demands, and that now begins to fill with something new, something that never before had permission to exist. That void doesn't frighten, it intrigues. Because for the first time, it's not full of orders, of imposed answers, of ancient demands. For the first time, it is a space where the right questions can emerge. And it is there, in that newly created silence, where the next phase of the movement that is transforming millions of men occurs. The construction of an identity of one's own. Not an inherited identity, not an imposed identity, not an identity that fits what's expected, but an identity born from within, from what truly matters, from what was always hidden beneath layers of expectations. And here, the transformation becomes almost mystical. The man starts to notice which things mattered to him only because others said they should matter. He begins to distinguish his own desires from borrowed desires. He begins to separate what he did to feel sufficient from what he does to feel at peace. And that distinction is a point of no return. Because when a man discovers which parts of his life were never his, something inside him activates, a sort of visceral rejection of the lie, an unstoppable need to rebuild himself with authenticity, to dismantle the false structures and raise the inner house again from the foundations. And this is where many are surprised. The life they always lived was not the life they wanted. It was the life they were supposed to want. And upon seeing it, they can't go back. It's at this point that something even deeper happens. The man's relationship with time changes. He no longer feels rushed to prove anything. He no longer feels anxiety about reaching goals he didn't choose. He no longer feels that he is running behind someone else's clocks. He starts to move each piece of his life with a new calm, a calm that seems to question everything. What am I running for? Who am I running for? Why am I running? And he discovers something he never imagined. He wasn't born to live accelerated. He was born to live consciously. And here comes one of the most powerful revelations of this whole process. The man who rebuilds himself begins to understand that his energy is sacred, that he cannot give it away without discernment, that he cannot donate strength to lost battles, that he cannot empty himself for commitments that destroy him, that he cannot allow just anyone to absorb him. That's why he becomes more selective, more careful, firmer, not harder, not colder, more aware of his value. And that awareness generates a phenomenon that unsettles all those who were used to his old version. He stops being available for everything, but when he is present, he is truly present. He no longer functions halfway. He doesn't show up by inertia. He doesn't give himself out of obligation. If he is there with intention. If he gives from his center. If he speaks from his truth. That change, that full, serene, steady presence is what the world doesn't know how to process. Because a man who has rebuilt himself from within is no longer moldable, no longer manipulable, no longer distractible. He becomes someone who unsettles by his clarity, by his controlled silence, by his way of standing tall without needing to display himself. And here the story takes another leap. one that very few talk about, but that everyone who lives this process recognizes. The man begins to feel a sort of return to his purest instinct. Not impulsive, reactive, or aggressive instinct, but conscious instinct. The kind that lay asleep under layers of modern norms. The kind that knows when to act and when to wait, when to advance and when to observe, when to speak and when to remain quiet. That instinct is the natural compass that had been switched off by years of contradictory demands. It is the inner sense that allows one to feel the path without anyone having to point it out. It is the connection with something deeper than logic and more stable than emotion. And when that instinct awakens, a kind of security appears that doesn't depend on circumstances, or on money, or on status, or on external validation. It's a silent security, invisible, but so solid that it starts to reconfigure everything around: decisions, relationships, habits, pace of life. The man begins to notice that now he decides from a much firmer place. He no longer trades his peace for acceptance. He no longer sacrifices his dignity for company. He no longer exchanges his coherence for quick approval. He discovers that life stops weighing on him when he finally aligns with himself. And then something few expect arises: the ability to be alone without feeling empty. Solitude stops being punishment. It becomes a sanctuary, a space for recovery, a fertile ground where the mind breathes, where the heart calms, where creativity, desire, purpose reappear. That's why so many men who step away in silence don't return as the same. They return more centered, more lucid, more complete. And when they come back, they do so with a different energy. An energy that doesn't seek to fit in, but to express itself. An energy that doesn't seek to be accepted, but to be lived. And here the core of this whole silent movement is revealed. They are not abandoning life. They are reclaiming it. They are not renouncing their role. They are choosing their own. They are not escaping the world. They are escaping what the world expected them to be. The most powerful thing about this process is not what they leave behind, but what begins to awaken within when they finally stop pretending. And this awakening is not over yet. What comes next will reveal the final phase: the reconstruction of masculinity from authenticity, not from obligation. And this is where the most unexpected phase begins, the deepest and most transformative of this entire silent movement. The reconstruction of masculinity from within, a masculinity that is not born from what fathers said, nor from what society demanded, nor from what social media repeats, but from something much older, more sincere, and more powerful: real identity. Because when a man goes through the silence, the fertile void, the break with external validation, and the recovery of his instinct, a phenomenon occurs that no one knew how to anticipate. A renewed masculinity appears, clean, without cultural additives, without imposed masks, without others' interpretations. A masculinity that has nothing to do with cold hardness, and neither with forced fragility. A masculinity that isn't trapped between extremes. A masculinity that simply is. And that essence begins to reveal uncomfortable truths. Truths that were always there but couldn't be seen, while the man lived suffocated by others' expectations. The first truth is this: many of the ideas you were told about being a man weren't strength. They were fear disguised as discipline. Fear of being judged. Fear of not fitting in. Fear of disappointing. Fear of showing yourself human. The world taught men to armor themselves so they would never be touched. But that armor also kept them from being authentic. That's why, when they begin to free themselves from the role imposed on them, something incredible happens. Strength is no longer defense. It is presence. A presence that doesn't need to impose itself. A presence that doesn't need to prove itself. A presence that simply exists, solid, calm, imperturbable. And here the second truth appears. Authentic masculinity is not defined by what you carry, but by what you choose to let go of. Let go of guilt. Let go of inherited obligation. Let go of the lie of the tireless hero. Let go of the mandate of the eternal provider. Let go of the idea that feeling is weakness. When a man lets go of all that, he doesn't become more fragile. He becomes more precise, more conscious, more complete, more real. Because no one talks about this, but it's inevitable. When a man stops performing, his gaze changes. It becomes deeper, sharper, more present, more dangerous, but not in the destructive sense, in the sense that he can no longer be ignored or manipulated. The man who is reborn is not a man accessible to everyone. He doesn't offer his energy to just anyone. He doesn't give his time out of habit. He doesn't seek to belong. He seeks to align. And that alignment brings with it a consequence that unsettles the world. He begins to attract what he used to chase. Not because he seeks it, not because he demands it, but because his inner vibration changes, and life responds to that vibration with almost surgical precision. The relationships that used to drain him can no longer sustain themselves. The people who used him no longer find space to do so. The dynamics that manipulated him break on their own. The bonds that forced him to sacrifice himself crumble. And other relationships arise, other people, other opportunities, all built upon a principle that didn't exist before. Mutual respect. Not respect out of fear. Not respect out of obligation. Authentic respect, born from the integrity that now inhabits him within. And here, the third truth arises, perhaps the most revealing of all. The men who step away aren't disappearing. They are returning to life with a new purpose, a purpose not based on surviving, but on living. Not based on obeying, but on understanding. Not based on enduring, but on evolving. And this purpose gives way to something that cannot be faked: deep serenity. A serenity that does not run from emotions, nor from conflict, nor from responsibility. A serenity that is born from knowing who one is, and who one no longer intends to be. And then a fascinating, almost spiritual phenomenon occurs. The man stops fearing the inner void, and starts fearing filling it with noise again, because he now understands that silence was the portal to himself. That disconnection was the beginning of true connection. That stepping away was the only way to truly return. And while this whole process advances without noise, without proclamations, without shouts, the most powerful form of masculinity that exists is born: conscious masculinity. A masculinity that doesn't dominate, it connects. That doesn't impose, it understands. That doesn't devastate, it builds. That doesn't shout, it influences. That doesn't run away, it chooses. That doesn't hide, it reveals itself. And this revelation brings with it one last transformation, the deepest of all. The man no longer lives divided between what he feels and what he shows. He no longer battles between what he desires and what he must. He no longer acts from obligation, but from authenticity. For the first time, finally there is coherence. And that coherence is pure power, because a man can lose everything and still stand, but when he loses his inner coherence, he loses his soul. And when he recovers it, then he recovers everything else. Here is where the silent movement reaches its highest point. the union between identity, purpose, and peace. And what comes next is even more impactful. The rebirth of this kind of man not only transforms his life, it transforms the world around him without him having to utter a single word. And now that we've made it this far, before we continue, I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price. With that said, let's continue with the video. Do you want to enter that part? Because what comes now is the explanation of how this inner awakening is reconfiguring relationships, social dynamics, and even the emotional course of an entire generation without making noise. And here, just when it seems you've understood everything, the most silent phase arrives. And, at the same time, the loudest within the soul. Because this kind of man, the one who rebuilt himself from within, who went through the silence, who left expectations behind and recovered his identity, begins to generate an effect that few expect. His very existence exposes the fragility of everything that once seemed unquestionable. He no longer needs to explain his decisions. He no longer needs to justify his changes. He no longer needs to ask permission to exist in a different way. His presence unsettles, but illuminates. It disorients, but inspires. It breaks schemes, but opens paths. Because when a man connects with his truth, he becomes a mirror for all those who remain trapped in theirs. And that mirror doesn't shout, doesn't accuse, doesn't point fingers. It just reflects. It reflects the life they could have if they had the courage to step away from the noise. It reflects the calm they could feel if they stopped chasing impossible expectations. It reflects the freedom they could experience if they broke the mold. And unintentionally, that man becomes a kind of silent point of reference for other men who still don't know they are searching for that path. He is not a leader, not a guru, not a teacher. He is simply someone who has already crossed the bridge and whose peace is noticeable from afar. And that's where one of the deepest phenomena of this generation occurs. Silent inspiration. Transformation without a speech. Impact without exhibition. Influence without effort. Because a man at peace changes more lives than a man desperate to be accepted ever will. And he does so without intending to. But here comes the end of this journey. And also the most important revelation of all. This movement did not start outside. It started within you. That feeling you had upon hearing each word, that discomfort, that recognition, that deep pang in your chest, is no coincidence. It's a sign. It's a beginning. It's a calling. Because deep down, you know this path is not just for millions of men. It is also yours. You know the life you imagined was not this hurried, broken life, full of someone else's noise. You know the voice you have inside wasn't born to be ignored. You know your value doesn't stand on external applause, but on internal decisions. You know what you left asleep wants to wake up. You know you are not destined to be the version others wrote, but the version you build from scratch. And here comes the conclusion no one usually says, but that you need to hear with absolute clarity. Walking away is not escaping. Walking away is choosing. Choosing who you are. Choosing what you allow. Choosing what defines you. Choosing what life you want to live without asking permission. The path of these men is not a flight. It is a return. A return to themselves. A return to their peace. A return to their identity. A return to the authenticity that was always there, waiting for the perfect moment to resurface. And if you've come this far, if you've felt the weight of each word, if you've recognized something inside you moving, breathing, awakening, then listen to this. You're not watching a video. You are witnessing your own beginning. Now, before we close, I invite you to do something very simple but very important. Write in the comments the phrase that sums up this inner rebirth. I walk inward. Leave it there. Let it be an anchor. Let it be a reminder. Let it be your silent declaration. And if this journey stirred you inside, if it made you think, if it showed you something you hadn't seen, subscribe. Because this conversation doesn't end here. It's just beginning. See you in the next video. Or rather, see you in the next transformation. Because what is awakening in you now doesn't plan to go back to sleep.